how you should approach writing a book. When I first started out, I was writing short stories and submitting them for contests and publications, right? And in those contests, there are rules that you have to follow, parameters you have to put your story into in order for it to be considered. So it kind of helps you with structuring your work, right? But it also narrows your creative focus, not a lot, but it does narrow it because you have to meet certain requirements. Writing a novel, you don't have to do any of that stuff. You're writing a novel because you feel compelled to do so. And putting it down on paper or on word processor or however you like to do it. Anyhow, I found the best approach for me anyways was to write a book that I would want to read. Write a book that would keep me interested. Now, I write horror, so a lot of times in horror you get the same formulas, right? You get you take possession of a house and there's something wrong with the house, or there's a portion of the woods that's haunted, or there's lots of tropes in horror that I found uninteresting, right? Not to say that there aren't good books about haunted places like The Shining. Like, come on, probably one of the best haunted places book of all time. But for me to write something like that, it just wasn't interesting to me, because you've read it and you've seen it before, so why would I want to do that again? The same thing with vampires and all that type of stuff. Now, there's some pretty good, interesting and new vampire books out there lately. Like, you got to look at Justin Cronin's The Passage series. Like, those are really, really good for vampires. And Brian Lumley had a really good series, an Necroscope series about vampires. They're really, really good. And I'm glad those guys wrote those. But once again, I try to avoid those because I'm just not that interested unless it's presenting something entirely new, right? So that's what I do when I try to write my books. I try to present something entirely new. I blend a lot of genres. Sometimes my books can be described as thrillers, but because I write, I want to say realistically, they'll be labeled as horror because some of the violence in it would deem it to be horror, right? But once again, it's like kind of a mashup of genres that I put into it. So what do I do when I sit down to write? I don't think about anyone or anything except my story, right? Now, it seems to be self-evident, but a lot of times people will sit down and they're dreaming about, what would happen if this book made it big, or they got a movie contract or whatever, and they're not concentrating on the story. And when I'm writing my books, I'm not writing for anyone but me, right? If it doesn't ever get published, that's fine. I'm not too concerned about that at the time, because you shouldn't be concerned. You shouldn't be thinking about, is this good enough to be published, until after you've edited it and as you've gone through all the things that you need to do to make it as clean and clear as possible. Essentially, don't think about your audience in advance. You are the audience for your own book. You should be sitting down. You have this idea in your head about a story. You have these characters, and you should be sitting down, excited to find out what they're going to do, right? What are these crazy people going to be up to today? What type of mayhem can I get these people into? That's how you should look at it, in my opinion. It's like, I wrote Dollhouse, and it was out of the gate. Got a lot of great reviews and was fairly successful because I'm kind of a nobody in the writing world, right? Like, it's a hard thing to break into, and I don't think people really understand that too well. I don't know if I certainly did. I thought once you got published, things would change, but it doesn't work that way, right? You still got to have readers. And then I went to the bookstore one time. I went to Chapters, Indigo, and you look on the shelf in the horror section, and there's a lot of names there, right? But there are way more writers than there are names on that shelf. So it's like, how does one get their name on that shelf, right? And that's the thing that I think people don't actually realize, is that there are a lot of writers out there. There are a lot of people trying to get their name on that shelf. And when you write with that goal in mind, the reader will pick up on it, right? You're trying to write something commercial instead of writing something from you, from inside you. That's something that you want to see, something that will make you excited to read. And I didn't really understand that until after Dollhouse was successful, and then I'm writing my second book, and I was concerned. I found myself being concerned about defending my reputation or upholding my reputation. And once I realized I was doing that, I stopped and I got back to the frame of mind when I was writing Dollhouse. Surprising myself with where my story went and making sure all the loose ends were tied. And since then, like I said, all my books have been getting average ratings, none under a 4-star, right? Which is, I find, pretty incredible. And I'm very grateful, right? I have like 5 books out, not one of them has an under 4-star rating. That's, you know, I'm kind of surprised every day about that. That people read my work and they enjoy it and they're surprised by it and they sit down to it excited by it. And I'm grateful for those people. And like I said, when you get down to writing, write what you would like to read. Don't worry about an audience that you don't even have yet, or it doesn't even exist really, because you don't know these people. Not that that means you shouldn't care for them. You should care for them in the editing phase, when it's like, okay, well, if I'm looking at this with stranger's eyes, does this make sense? And if it doesn't, then you got to rewrite it. That's when you need to respect your audience, because you want them to have an enjoyable reading experience with as the minimal amount of roadblocks to their reading experience as possible. And that's where the editing that's where good editing comes in, right? But in the initial phase, writing your first draft, don't think about anything except that story and surprising the hell out of yourself, all right? Hopefully this helps, and take care, everyone.